My father announced it right after the blessing, before anyone had touched their plates. His voice carried that rehearsed quality of someone who'd practiced the words in front of a mirror. "Bridget, we're signing the house over to you. It's time you had something to build your future on." My sister Bridget gasped, hands flying to her mouth like she'd just been proposed to. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Relatives around the table erupted in applause. I sat perfectly still, fork resting against my plate, and did the math in my head. $347,000. That's what I'd put into that house over the last 8 years. Renovations, repairs, property taxes during the months they couldn't quite make it. When I finally spoke, my voice came out quieter than I expected. "And what about me?" My father didn't even look in my direction. He was too busy soaking in Bridget's tears of joy. "You should be grateful for nothing, Dominic. It taught you to stand on your own 2 feet. The table went silent. Someone's fork clinked against china. I felt every eye turn toward me, waiting to see if I'd make a scene. I didn't. I just stood up, smoothed my napkin onto the table, and walked toward the door. Behind me, my father called out, irritation creeping into his voice. "Where are you going?" "We're in the middle of dinner." I stopped, hand on the doorknob, and looked back at him one last time. "To get my receipts." Before I tell you what those receipts revealed, tell me where you're watching from. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, because this story is about the moment you realize you've been building someone else's future while they've been erasing yours. My name is Dominic Reeves, and I learned early that in my family, love was a competition I was never meant to win. I grew up in Bend, Oregon, in a house that sat on 3 acres of pine trees and possibility. My father, Vincent Reeves, built that house himself back in the 80s, framed every wall, laid every tile, planted every tree. It was his masterpiece, his legacy, the thing he loved more than anything except maybe Bridget. My sister was born when I was 7, and from the moment she arrived, the entire axis of our family tilted toward her. She was the surprise baby, the miracle child, the daughter my mother had prayed for after 3 miscarriages. I became background noise. It wasn't cruel, not at first. Just a quiet reorganization of priorities. My baseball games conflicted with her dance recitals, so I learned to Uber to the field. My college fund got temporarily borrowed for her braces, her school trips, her art supplies. "You're the big brother," my mother would say, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You understand." I did understand. I understood that understanding was the price I paid for being noticed at all. After high school, I left for Seattle. Studied architecture at UW. Worked my way through school doing construction jobs, learning the trade from the ground up, framing, drywall, finish carpentry, everything my father had taught me during the rare moments he had time. By 25, I had my own renovation company. By 30, I was pulling in 6 figures, turning old Seattle bungalows into showpieces for tech money families who wanted character, but didn't want to do the work themselves. I was good at what I did. Better than good. I could walk into a disaster of a house and see its potential, see exactly what it needed to become something worth keeping. Which is probably why I kept trying to save my father's house. It started small. A call from my mother in 2016, voice tight with worry. "Dominic, the roof is leaking. Your father's been patching it, but..." "I'll take care of it," I said. I drove down the following weekend with my crew. We tore off the old shingles, replaced the rotted decking, put on a new architectural roof that would last 30 years. $22,000 in materials and labor. My father watched from the porch, arms crossed. When we finished, he walked the perimeter, inspecting every edge, every seal. "You missed a flashing near the chimney," he said. "Not, thank you. Not, this looks great. Just criticism." I fixed the flashing. The next year, it was the septic system. Then the foundation cracks. Then the HVAC unit that died in the middle of a cold snap. Every time, the same pattern. A call from my mother, a weekend trip from Seattle, my money and my labor fixing problems my father refused to acknowledge until they became emergencies. I never asked for repayment. This was family. This was the house I grew up in. This was my father's legacy. And besides, I told myself, maybe this was how I earned back some of what I'd lost. his respect, his attention, his pride. Maybe if I kept the house standing, he'd finally see me. By 2024, I'd put $347,000 into that property. I had every receipt, every invoice, every bank transfer saved in a folder labeled Family Home on my laptop. Not because I planned to use them. Because I was an architect. I documented everything. Then came Thanksgiving. The invitation arrived in early November, a text from Bridget in our family group chat. Big family Thanksgiving at the house this year. Mom's doing her famous turkey. Dad's excited to see everyone. You better be there, dumb. Turkey red heart. I almost declined. I had a project finishing up in Bellingham, a contractor breathing down my neck about delays. But something in the tone of the message felt orchestrated, like she was trying too hard. I should have trusted that instinct. I drove down the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the highway cutting through forests that had already started their November fade. The house looked good as I pulled up. The roof I'd replaced, the siding I'd repaired, the landscaping I'd helped redesign 2 summers ago. My father's masterpiece, preserved by my money. Inside, the place smelled like sage and butter and something else I couldn't quite name, anticipation, maybe. My mother hugged me at the door, holding on a beat too long. I'm glad you're here, she whispered. Where else would I be? She pulled back, searching my face for something, then turned away quickly. Bridget's in the kitchen. She brought someone. The someone turned out to be Kyle, a guy Bridget had been dating for 6 months. He worked in marketing, had a firm handshake and a smile that showed too many teeth. He called my father sir, and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Your sister tells me you're an architect, Kyle said, cornering me near the drinks table. Renovations, mostly. That's cool, man. Real hands-on work. He said it the way people say, bless your heart, polite, but dismissive. Bridget floated through the rooms like she owned them, touching surfaces I'd restored, straightening frames I'd rehung. She looked happy in a way that made my chest tight. The table was set for 12, aunts, uncles, cousins I saw once a year. Everyone arrived in that golden hour before sunset, carrying dishes and wine and the kind of forced cheerfulness that marks obligatory family gatherings. We sat. My father stood at the head of the table, hand raised for silence. He'd gotten older in the past year, more gray, more lines, but his voice still carried that authority he'd built his whole life on. Before we eat, he began, I want to say something. My mother's hand found his, squeezing. Bridget sat up straighter, eyes bright. This house, my father continued, gesturing to the walls around us, has been the center of this family for 40 years. I built it with my own hands, raised my kids here, created a life here. Heads nodded around the table. Someone murmured agreement. And it's time to think about the future. About legacy. He turned to Bridget, his expression softening in a way I'd rarely seen. Bridget, your mother and I have decided, we're signing the house over to you. It's time you had something to build your future on. The room exploded. Applause, gasps, Bridget's hands flying to her face as tears spilled over. Kyle stood up, shook my father's hand like they just closed a business deal. My mother was crying. My aunt was already asking about the timeline. My uncle clapped my father on the shoulder, congratulating him on his generosity. I sat there, doing math. $347,000. 8 years of weekends. Dozens of emergency trips when something broke and they needed it fixed right away. Every invoice marked paid in full, with my money. The noise around me turned to static. Finally, I found my voice. And what about me? The table didn't go quiet immediately. It took a moment for my words to cut through the celebration. When they did, the silence was sharp enough to draw blood. My father looked at me like he'd forgotten I was there. What about you? The house, I said, keeping my voice level. I've been helping maintain it for years. What's my share? My father's expression hardened. Your share? I've put a lot of money into this place, Dad. Time, labor? You did that on your own, he interrupted. No one asked you to. The words landed like a slap. Around the table, relatives shifted uncomfortably. Bridget's smile had frozen in place. No one asked me? I repeated slowly. Mom called me every time something broke. You stood on the porch and watched me fix your roof. And I appreciated it, my father said, voice rising. But that was your choice. You wanted to help. You volunteered. I helped because this is our family home. Because I stopped hearing how foolish it sounded even as I said it. I thought it mattered. My father set down his fork with deliberate care. You know what your problem is, Dominic? You've always kept score. Always looking for credit. That's not what family does. Heat crawled up my neck. I'm not looking for credit. I'm asking for fairness. Life isn't fair, he said flatly. Your sister needs this house. She's starting a family. Building a life. You have your business, your fancy Seattle condo. You don't need anything from us. I felt something shift inside my chest, like a foundation settling after years of pressure. So because I built something on my own, I don't deserve. You should be grateful for nothing, my father said, cutting me off. It taught you to stand on your own 2 feet. Look at you, successful, independent. You got that because we didn't coddle you the way we did Bridget. The table was silent now. Even the clinking of silverware had stopped. I looked at my mother. She was staring at her plate, lips pressed thin. I looked at Bridget. She met my eyes for a fraction of a second, then looked away. I stood up, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor I'd refinished 3 years ago. Where are you going? My father asked, irritation replacing whatever authority he'd been wielding. We're in the middle of dinner. I smoothed my napkin onto the table, taking one last look at the house I'd saved, the walls, the ceiling, the windows I'd replaced so they wouldn't leak anymore. To get my receipts. My father scoffed. Receipts? Always with the paperwork. You can't even let your sister have one moment without making it about you. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something I should have seen years ago. He didn't want me here. He never had. I was just useful. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, my mother called out, voice breaking. Dominic, please. Don't leave like this. I stopped, hand on the doorknob. Like what, Mom? Quietly? The way I've been doing everything else. Then I walked out into the cold Oregon night, got in my truck, and drove back to Seattle. The house I'd saved would never be mine. But I was done saving things that didn't want to be saved. I didn't go back for my things. I had my laptop, my phone, my wallet. Everything else could stay in that house. My childhood, my hope, my delusion that hard work and sacrifice would eventually earn me a place at my own family's table. The drive back to Seattle took 4 hours. I spent most of it numb, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the white lines disappear under my headlights. By the time I pulled into my building's garage, it was past midnight. I rode the elevator to my condo on the 14th floor, dropped my keys on the counter, and opened my laptop. The folder was right where I'd left it, family home. I opened it. 8 years of documentation stared back at me. Invoices for materials. Receipts for labor. Bank transfers with notes like roof repair, and foundation work, and emergency HVAC replacement. I'd kept everything. Not out of suspicion, but habit. In my business, paper trails weren't paranoia. They were survival. I spent the next 3 hours building a spreadsheet. Line by line, dollar by dollar, organizing every cent I'd put into that house. When I finished, the total sat at the bottom of the screen, stark and undeniable. $347,293.18. I leaned back, staring at the number. Nearly $250,000. Enough to buy a house of my own outright. Enough to retire early if I wanted. Enough to matter. Apparently not enough to earn me even a conversation before my father handed the entire property to Bridget. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Mom, please call me. Your father didn't mean it the way it sounded. I didn't respond. Another text, this time from Bridget. Bridget, Dom, I'm sorry. I didn't know they were going to announce it like that. Can we talk? I turned off my phone. Friday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. I ignored all of them. Instead, I called my attorney, a woman named Petra Voss who'd helped me navigate a few messy contractor disputes over the years. She answered on the second ring. Dom, happy Thanksgiving. I need to talk about a family issue. Her tone shifted immediately, professional. Tell me. I laid it out. The years of repairs, the money I'd sunk into the property, the announcement at dinner, my father's dismissal of any claim I might have. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Do you have documentation? Every receipt, every invoice, every transfer. And did they ever promise to repay you? Any written agreements? No. It was just understood that I was helping family. She exhaled slowly. That makes it harder, but not impossible. If you can prove the work was done with the expectation of compensation or equity, you might have a claim. It's called quantum merit, payment for value provided. What do I need to do? First, send me everything you have. Second, I'll draft a formal demand letter. Third, she paused. Are you sure you want to do this? Legal action against family gets ugly fast. I thought about my father's face when he said I should be grateful for nothing. Thought about Bridget's tears of joy while I sat there invisible. Thought about 8 years of weekends spent fixing a house that would never be mine. I'm sure. Okay, Petra said. Let's get started. The demand letter went out the following Tuesday, sent via certified mail to my parents' address. The house address, the one I could probably still navigate blindfolded. It was professional, clinical, stripped of emotion. It outlined every major expense I'd covered, attached copies of invoices and bank records, and requested either financial compensation or an equity stake in the property proportional to my investment. The deadline for response was 30 days. My father called within 3 hours of signing for the letter. I let it go to voicemail. Dominic, this is your father. I don't know what the hell you think you're doing, but you need to call me back immediately. This is ridiculous. This is family business, not some lawsuit. Call me. I deleted the message. My mother called next, her voice strained and thin. Dominic, please. Your father is so upset. This letter, it's saying we owe you hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not how this works. You helped because you wanted to help. Please, let's just talk about this. I saved the message but didn't respond. Bridget was the last to call, and she didn't leave a voicemail. Just a text. I can't believe you're doing this. You're going to destroy this family over money? I thought you were better than that. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending I didn't notice. She didn't respond. Over the next 3 weeks, my phone became a battlefield. Relatives I barely knew called to tell me I was being selfish, ungrateful, vindictive. An uncle accused me of trying to steal Bridget's future. A cousin suggested I was jealous of her relationship. No one, not one person, asked if maybe, just maybe, I had a point. My attorney kept me grounded. This is normal, Petra said during one of our check-ins. When you threaten the family narrative, everyone defends it. It's easier than admitting they've been complicit. Complicit in what? In treating you like you were less important. In benefiting from your labor without acknowledging it. In letting your father rewrite history so he looks generous instead of exploitative. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. The 30-day deadline came and went with no formal response from my parents. Instead, my mother called again, this time crying. Please, Dominic. Your father won't say it, but this is killing him. The stress, his blood pressure is through the roof. Can't we just sit down and talk? As a family? We tried that at Thanksgiving, I said quietly. It didn't go well. Because you ambushed everyone? I asked a question, Mom. One question. And Dad told me I should be grateful for nothing. She was quiet for a long moment. He didn't mean it like that. Then how did he mean it? No answer. I hung up. In early January, Petra called with an update. They've hired an attorney. Douglas Brennan, local guy, does a lot of estate work. He sent over a response. And? They're claiming all the work you did was voluntary, done out of familial affection, not expectation of payment. They're saying you never once asked for reimbursement or indicated you expected compensation. Because I thought it was understood. I know. But legally, that's murky. We can argue implied contract, unjust enrichment, a few other theories. But it's going to be a fight. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what I was stepping into. How long? If it goes to trial? A year, maybe more. And it'll cost you legal fees, time, the emotional toll of dragging your family through court. And if I drop it? She didn't answer right away. Then you walk away with nothing. And they get to keep the story that you were just being helpful, that you have no claim, that Bridget deserves the house because they said so. I thought about my father's face across that Thanksgiving table. Thought about Bridget's tears of joy. Thought about 8 years of my life reduced to voluntary. File the lawsuit, I said. You're sure? I'm sure. The lawsuit became public record in February. Within a week, it was local news, not front page, but buried in the regional section. Seattle architect sues parents over family home. The article was short, factual, and devastating. It included the dollar amount, mentioned my father's age, and quoted an anonymous family friend who called the lawsuit a heartbreaking betrayal. My phone exploded again, this time with strangers. Some supportive, some vicious. Local contractors I'd worked with reached out, some to offer solidarity, others to quietly distance themselves. One message stood out from an old professor at UW. Professor Chin, Dominic, I saw the news. I don't know the details, but I know you. You don't do things lightly. Whatever you're fighting for, I hope you win. I read it 3 times, feeling something crack open in my chest. Someone believed me. Someone thought I might be right. It was such a small thing. But it was enough to keep going. The mediation happened in April, in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and defeat. My parents sat on one side of the table with their attorney. I sat on the other with Petra. A mediator, a gray-haired woman named Alice Thornton, sat at the head, hands folded calmly. My father wouldn't look at me. My mother kept twisting her wedding ring, eyes red from crying. Bridget wasn't there, her attorney had advised against it. Alice opened with the standard speech about finding common ground, about the goal being resolution, not victory. My father interrupted halfway through. This is my son, he said, voice shaking with anger or grief, I couldn't tell which. My son, suing me for helping. For being part of this family. Alice didn't flinch. Mr. Reeves, I understand this is emotional. But we're here to discuss the financial claims, not. There are no financial claims, he snapped. He gave that money freely. No one forced him. Petra slid a document across the table. These are text messages from Mrs. Reeves between 2016 and 2024. In them, she repeatedly asks Dominic for help with specific repairs, mentioning the family's financial strain. In several, she explicitly says, we'll figure out how to pay you back. My mother's face crumpled. I didn't mean. You meant it, I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken since we sat down. You meant it when you needed me. You just stopped meaning it once I'd already paid. My father's jaw tightened. We raised you. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. You don't get to bill us for being a son. I'm not billing you for being a son, I said, voice steady. I'm billing you for being a contractor you never paid. The mediator cleared her throat. Let's talk numbers. Mr. Reeves, your son is claiming $347,000 in documented expenses. That's insane, my father said. With a proposed settlement, Alice continued, of $150,000 or a 30% equity stake in the property. My father laughed, sharp and bitter. 30%. Of the house I built. That I kept standing, I said. We stared at each other across the table, and I saw it then. The gulf between us, wide and unbridgeable. He genuinely believed he owed me nothing. And I finally understood I would never make him see otherwise. After 2 hours of circular arguments, Alice called a recess. In the hallway, Petra pulled me aside. They're not budging. Douglas says they'd rather go to trial than give you a percentage of the house. Then we go to trial. She studied my face. You know you might lose, right? Judges are reluctant to force parents to compensate their kids. It sets a precedent they don't like. I know. So why keep fighting? I thought about that for a long moment. Because if I walk away now, the story stays the same. I'm the ungrateful son. Bridget's the deserving daughter. And the 8 years I spent trying to matter just disappear. Petra nodded slowly. Then we fight. The trial was set for September. But in late August, something shifted. My mother called. Not crying this time, just tired. Dominic, I need to tell you something. I braced myself for another guilt trip, another plea to drop the lawsuit. Your father had a heart attack last week. The world tilted. What? He's okay. He's stable. But the doctors said the stress. Her voice caught. They said he can't keep doing this. I sat down hard on my couch, phone pressed to my ear. Is he? He wants to settle, she said quietly. Not because he thinks you're right, but because he can't go through a trial. 2 weeks later, I sat in Petra's office while she reviewed the settlement offer. They're offering $125,000, paid over 3 years. No equity in the house. And a non-disclosure agreement. You can't talk publicly about the case or the settlement. I stared at the number. It wasn't what I'd asked for. It wasn't what I'd earned. But it was acknowledgement. It was something. There's one more condition, Petra said carefully. They want you to sign a waiver saying you'll never contest the transfer of the house to Bridget. Essentially, you're giving up any future claim. I thought about my father in a hospital bed, monitors beeping, finally forced to admit I'd been carrying weight he refused to see. I thought about Bridget, living in a house held up by my money, my time, my sacrifice. I thought about the 8 years I'd spent trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't fit. I'll sign, I said. Petra raised an eyebrow. You're sure? I'm sure. But add one clause. They have to acknowledge in writing that I provided significant financial support for the property. Not a loan. Not a gift. Support. I want it documented. They might not go for that. Then there's no deal. 3 days later, they agreed. The money came in installments over 3 years. I didn't spend it on anything extravagant. I put most of it toward a down payment on a building in Seattle, an old craftsman that needed work, the kind of project I'd built my career on. I gutted it myself. New foundation, new electrical, new everything. Turned it into a 4-unit rental property that would generate income for the rest of my life. My own legacy. One no one could take from me. I didn't hear from my father after the settlement. No call, no letter, no acknowledgement beyond the checks that arrived like clockwork. My mother sent Christmas cards, generic ones, the kind you buy in bulk. She signed them Mom and Dad, but never mentioned coming to visit, never suggested we try to rebuild. Bridget sent one message, 2 years after everything settled. I'm getting married. At the house. I know you probably won't come, but I wanted you to know you're invited. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to go, wanted to see if time had softened anything, if maybe we could find our way back to something resembling family. But I knew the truth. I would walk into that house, the house I'd saved, and I would be a guest. A stranger in a place I'd built. So I sent a card with a polite decline and a generous check. The check cleared. She never acknowledged it. It's been 5 years now since that Thanksgiving dinner. I'm 41, running a successful business, living in a city I love. Sometimes I drive past the old house in Bend, not on purpose, just when I'm down that way for work. It looks good. Bridget's kept it up. The yard is tidy. The paint is fresh. It's everything my father wanted it to be. And I'm everything I had to become without him. People ask sometimes if I regret the lawsuit, if I wish I'd just let it go. I tell them the truth, I don't regret fighting for myself. I regret that I had to. My father gave my sister the house at Thanksgiving. He told me I should be grateful for nothing. He was right about one thing. Nothing taught me to stand on my own. But he was wrong about gratitude. I'm not grateful for being dismissed. I'm not grateful for being erased. I'm not grateful for learning that my value to my family was measured in how much I could give without asking for anything in return. I'm grateful I finally stopped giving. And I'm grateful I built something they can never take away. If you've ever been the one who gave everything and got nothing, tell me your story in the comments. Where are you listening from? What would you have done? Hit subscribe if stories like this remind you that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when it counts. And sometimes, The person who shows up for you has to be you.